let's install PenTDB or PenTracker DB. And since there is not an installation script yet, it is a manual process, but it's not too difficult. We're going to do this in 3 parts. First, we're going to download the source, and since it's a web app, we're going to configure Apache to serve that source. Then we're going to initialize and set up the database, and then we are going to finish up with app settings and preferences for PenTDB. Alright, so the first thing to do is create a directory where PenTDB is going to live. I've got a pen testing directory here. And so I'm just going to make a directory for it. I'm also going to make a directory for the Apache logs. And then there's a feature that lets you cache any exploit DB pages that you're using and researching during your testing, cache them locally, which I find kind of handy, and it helps me in documentation. So we can make sure that feature is going to work by creating the exploit-db-pages subdirectory. All right. So now, next step is to go ahead and download the source. You can clone it right from the GitHub. And if you notice, the GitHub is also named PenTDB. So let's move that to just be HTML. There we go. All right, so the source is down and on our machine. Looks like that. So next, we want to configure Apache 2.4. And I'm demonstrating this install on Kali, which comes with Apache 2.4. PHP is already installed. MySQL is already installed. Those are prerequisites before you load up and install PenTDB. I happen to have an Apache 2.4 example config file right there in the source. So we can just use that file for quick configuration. And the way we do that is we go to the Apache 2 directory and we go to the sites available folder, and then we're just going to copy that sample config to pentdb.conf. And then it's important to go ahead and edit that file and make sure that it matches your directory structure. So I am using root pentesting with a subdirectory of PenTDB with HTML as my root. So that matches document root. So everything is looking pretty good here. Here's my custom error logs. They're going to be configured right there. I'm going to go ahead and use the server name pentdb.kali.local. I'll set that up in the host file here pretty quick. And then I'm going to use port 411 for PenTDB, and that's so that I can keep port 80 and port 8080 and port 443 all open for my pen testing activity in case I need to serve files during my pen tests. There's also a line up here to remember to add the listen for port 411 to the Apache 2 ports configuration file. That is really important, so let's do that next, and that's just going to be right here, one directory up. There's the ports config file right there. So let's edit that, and I've already put it in there from my last run through on this, but there's the line, the listen 127 0.0.0.1 411, and I'm keeping it the local IP so that it's this machine only, because PenTDB is not a secure web app, not by a long shot. So you don't want to be serving it from your testing machine. So great, we've got that in there configured. Then let's go ahead and edit the etc host file. Or host file, whichever one you happen to be using. 127.0.0.1, and we're just going to go ahead and call this pentdb.kali.local to match our Apache configuration. All right, so is that everything? We've matched our paths in the config. Oh, yeah, so the command to go ahead and add that configuration file is A2 enable site. There we go. And then I can actually start up Apache 2. Let's see, make sure it's running. All right, I think we're all set there. Now for the database setup. Now let's make sure that I'm running, that MySQL is running. There we go, started that up. And we can log in to newer versions of MySQL. If we're root, you can just say user root, and it doesn't even need a password. And so the first thing we want to do is create the PenTDB database. So let's do that. The next thing we want to do is create a user for that database that has a password and permissions. And so I'm just going to use the user Elmer2 and webapp56 as the password. And there's the grants you need. And that exact grant statement is in the installation instructions. Okay, so now that we've got that, it's always a good idea to flush privileges after that. After you add users, that's always a good thing to do. All right, now that we've got an empty database created, the next thing to do is fill that database with stuff. Tables, and I've even got some sample tests in there for the installation so that you can get a quick start going. And if we go to the source area, the installation file that's included is this one right there. And so you can just say, use MySQL to go ahead and import that file. Boom. And I think that's in there. So that looks good. All right. Next, we're going to customize the settings files. What we've got is a library, a database library right there, the DrewDBlib. And if we go into that directory, we see that there's a settings default right there. So we actually want to copy that to call it DrewDB settings.php, like that. And then we want to edit that DrewDB settings.php. And down at the bottom here is where we're going to put in the username we used, which I'm using Elmer2 for this video. The password, webapp56. And then also remember to go ahead and put in the database name in that config line. And I'm just using PenTDB as the name of the database. All right, now it should be able to read the database and actually operate. So I want to make sure I've added PenTDB to my host file. Yes, I have, so that's good. There's one place that I can customize if we go up a directory here. There's a config file right here for the PenTDB config options. I'll show you that real quick. It's not required. There's nothing in here you need to change. Basically, it's going to save you some typing because it's going to go ahead and save your data paths for where your test data lives so that you don't have to type it in when you're creating new hosts, and it knows where to look for files. So it goes by machine name. When you're on Kali, it'll use this one, in case Kali. You can also customize your own machine name, putting your own machine name up there. And if the machine name does not come back as either Kali or what you've customized there, it's just going to go to the default path, which is really generic. I want to customize my Kali path. So my default data path is root pen testing, and actually I'm going to work on hack the box stuff, so I'm going to put that in with a trailing slash. You don't need to worry about default command path yet. Those features aren't fully developed. And the host commands, these are scripts that I've written. Make tank builds a test area for me. with IP address and hostname data in there, and then I've got a script called PenScan that automatically runs a few Nmap scans. If there's SMB ports open, it runs an SMB scan for me, this sort of thing. So you can put your own script names in here, and I'll show you how those work when I do the demo usage video for this. So there we go. We've customized our data path, and I think we've got Apache running. We've got MySQL running. Let's see if there's anything to fix. Let's see. If I go to PenTDB, Kali local, and remember that it's at port 411, there we have it. It's running. So we can add a new session name, and we'll just call this group 5. And here again, you get to edit your data path if you want. So if group 5 was on a different, testing set and it wasn't Hack the Box, I could change it right there. And I can change it later too, but it's just nice to have everything set as defaults. So when I say create session, there we have our data path up here. So it's going to store all the files there. It's going to look for data files and result files there. I'm in session group 5. Templates is how we edit templates. I'll show you that in the usage demo video. And IP address, so if we were to say, okay, we need to test the host of 10.10.10.10, and this is host 3A, you can add host, and there we have it. It's saying no service records found because there are no ports for 10.10.10 yet. But here's the data. Here's a spot for me to take some notes, paste some Wireshark stuff if I see. There's where I put my proof. I've got room for loot. Lessons learned, a great field that a friend of mine taught me. Man, that has helped me tremendously. And then flags, points. And I'll show you how all of these work in the usage demo. But there we have it, an up and running PenTDB.